Well, welcome everyone. Thank you very much for coming together to immerse ourselves in this rich body of wisdom we call Torah. We are going to be reading through the entirety of this week's Torah portion, which is Vayishlach. It's found in the book of Genesis, beginning in chapter 32 with verse 4. We'll read through the English translation of it, and then I'll share with you a focused study about it, and then we'll open ourselves up to this wonderful, rich, collaborative conversation we have, in which we discover not only more about the text, but the more about one another as well. So if you'd like to join me in the recitation of the blessing, feel free to do so. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher
kishanu
mitzvotanu
v'tzivanu
b'divrei Torah. Thank you, God, for the opportunity to immerse ourselves in words and deeds and relationships of Torah. I'll share with you the opening verses, and then I'll invite others to have an opportunity to read as well. Jacob sent messengers ahead to his brother Esau in the land of Seir, the country of Edom, and instructed them as follows. Thus shall you say, to my lord Esau, thus says your servant Jacob, I stayed with Laban and remained until now. I have acquired cattle, asses, sheep, and male and female slaves, and I send this message to my lord in the hope of gaining your favor. The messengers returned to Jacob, saying, we came to your brother Esau. He himself is coming to meet you, and there are 400 men with him. Jacob was greatly frightened. In his anxiety, he divided the people with him, and the flocks and herds and camels into 2 camps, thinking, if Esau comes to one camp and attacks it, the other camp may yet escape. Then Jacob said, O God of my father Abraham and God of my father Isaac, O God, who said to me, return to your native land, and I will deal bountifully with you. I am unworthy of all the kindness that you have so steadfastly shown your servant. With my staff alone I crossed this Jordan, and now I have become 2 camps. Deliver me, I pray, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau. Else I fear he may come and strike me down, mothers and children alike. Yet you have said, I will deal bountifully with you and make your offspring as the sands of the sea, which are too numerous to count. Mark Thompson, would you like to read a little bit, starting with verse 14?
Thank you. After spending the night there, he selected from what was at hand these presents for his brother Esau, 200 she-goats and 20 he-goats, 200 ewes and 20 rams, 30 milch camels with their colts, 40 cows and 10 bulls, 20 she-asses and 10 he-asses. These he put in the charge of his servants, drove by drove, and he told his servants, go on ahead and keep a distance between droves. He instructed the one in front as follows. When my brother Esau meets you and asks you, whose men are you? Where are you going? And whose animals are these ahead of you? You shall answer, your servant Jacob's. They are a gift sent to my lord Esau, and Jacob himself is right behind us. He gave similar instructions to the second one, and the third, and all the others who followed the droves, namely, thus and so shall you say to Esau when you reach him, and you shall add, and your servant Jacob himself is right behind us. For he reasoned, if I propitiate him with presents in advance and then face him, perhaps he will show me favor. And so the gift went on ahead while he remained in camp that night.
Oh, thank you, Mark. Margot, we're now at verse 23, if you'd like to read a little bit.
That same night he arose and taking his two wives, his two maidservants, and his 11 children, he crossed the ford of the Jabbok. After taking them across the stream, he sent across all his possessions. Jacob was alone, and a man wrestled with him until the break of dawn. When he saw that he had not prevailed against him, he wrenched Jacob's hip at the socket, so that the socket of the hip was strained as he wrestled with him. Then he said, Let me go, for dawn is breaking." But he answered, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." "What is your name?" He replied, "Jacob." Jacob said he, "Your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with beings divine and human, and you have prevailed." Jacob asked, "Pray, tell me your name." But he said, "You must not ask my name." And he took his leave, then. So Jacob named the place Peniel, meaning "I have seen the divine being face to face, yet my life has been preserved." The sun rose upon him as he passed Peniel, limping on his hip. That is why the children of Israel to this day do not eat the thigh muscle that is on the socket on the hip, since Jacob's hip socket was wrenched at the thigh muscle.
Thank you so much, Mark. Jim, we're at the very start of chapter 33, if you'd like to read a little bit.
Thank you, Rabbi. Looking up, Jacob saw Esau coming, accompanied by 400 men. He divided the children among Leah, Rachel, and the two maids, putting the maids and their children first, Leah and her children next, and Rachel and Joseph last. He himself went on ahead and bowed low to the ground 7 times until he was near his brother. Esau ran to greet him. He embraced him, and falling on his neck, he kissed him, and they wept. Looking about, he saw the women and children, who he asked, "Are these with you?" He answered, "The children with whom God has favored your servant." Then the maids with their children came forward and bowed low. Next, Leah with her children came forward and bowed low. And he asked, "What do you mean by all this company which I have met?" He answered, "To gain my Lord's favor." Esau said, "I have enough, my brother. Let what you have remain yours." But Jacob said, "No, I pray you, if you would do me this favor, accept from me this gift. For to see your face is like seeing the face of God, and you have received me favorably. Please accept my present, which has been brought to you, for God has favored me, and I have plenty." And when he urged him, he accepted.
Oh, thank you, Jim. Rose, we're at verse 12, if you'd like to read a bit.
Okay, and am I audible?
Yes.
Oh, and Esau said, "Let us start our journey, and I will proceed at your pace." But he said to him, "My Lord knows that the children are frail, and that the flocks and herds which are nursing are a care to me. If they are driven hard a single day, all the flocks will die. Let my Lord go on ahead of his servant, while I travel slowly, at the pace of the cattle before me, and at the pace of the children, until I come to my Lord in Seir." Then Asaph said, "Let me assign to you some of the people who are with me." But he said, "Oh no, my Lord is too kind to me." So Esau started back that day on his way to Seir. But Jacob journeyed on to Sukkot and built a house for himself and made stalls for his cattle. And that's why the place was called Sukkot. Jacob arrived safely in the city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, having come thus from Padam Aram, and he encamped before the city. The parcel of land where he pitched his tent he purchased from the kin of Hamor, Shechem's father, for 100 kesitos. He set up an altar there and called it El Elohai Yisrael.
Thank you so much, Rose. Carl and Janet, we're at the very start of chapter 34, if you'd each like to read a little bit.
Okay, go ahead.
Now Dinah, the daughter whom Leah had borne to Jacob, went out to visit the daughters of the land. Shechem, son of Hamor the Hivite, chief of the country, saw her, and took her, and lay with her by force. Being strongly drawn to Dinah, daughter of Jacob, and in love with the maiden, he spoke to the maiden tenderly. So Shechem said to his father Hamor, "Get me this girl as a wife." Jacob heard that he had defiled his daughter Dinah, but since his sons were in the field with his cattle, Jacob kept silent until they came home. Then Shechem's father Hamor came out to Jacob to speak to him. Meanwhile, Jacob's son, having heard the news, came in from the field. The men were distressed and very angry because he had committed an outrage in Israel by lying with Jacob's daughter, a thing not to be done. And Hamor spoke with them, saying, "My son Shechem longs for your daughter. Please give her to him." Jacob, said he, "Your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel."
Oops, you're
Am I going the wrong direction? I'm sorry.
You can start with verse 8 again.
Okay. And Hamor spoke with them, saying, "My son Shechem longs for your daughter. Please give her to him in marriage. Intermarry with us, give your daughters to us, and take our daughters for yourselves. You will dwell among us, and the land will be open before you. Settle, move about, and acquire holdings in it." Then Shechem said to her father and brothers, "Do me this favor, and I will pay whatever you tell me. Ask of me a bride price ever so high, as well as gifts, and I will pay what you tell me. Only give me the maiden for a wife."
okay. Jacob's sons answered Shechem and his father Hamor, speaking with guile because he had defiled their sister Dinah, and said to them, "We cannot do this thing, to give our sister to a man who is uncircumcised, for that is a disgrace among us. Only on this condition will we agree with you, that you will become like us in that every male among you is circumcised. Then we will give your daughter to you and take your daughters to ourselves, and we will dwell among you and become as one kindred. But if you will not listen to us and become circumcised, you will take our daughter and go." These words pleased Hamor and Hamor's son Shechem, and the youth lost no time in doing this thing, for he wanted Jacob's daughter. So he was the most respected in his father's house. So Hamor and his son Shechem went to the public place of their town and spoke to their fellow townsmen, saying, "These people are our friends. Let them settle in the land and move about in it, for the land is large enough for them. We will take their daughters to ourselves as wives and give our daughters to them. But only on this condition will the men agree with us to dwell amongst us and be as one kindred, that all our males become circumcised." Oops, I think I missed a page.
That's there.
Yeah, Carl, if you'll just read through verse 24, that would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Here. You just want mine?
yeah, sure.
Okay. Circumcised right there.
Okay.
Their cattle.
Their cattle and substance and all their beasts will be ours if we only agree to their terms, so that they will settle among us. All who went out of the gate of his town heeded Hamor and his son Shechem, and all males, all those who went out of the gate of his town, were circumcised.
Thank you so much. Richard, we're at verse 25, if you'd like to read 25 through verse 31.
Thank you. On the third day, when they were in pain, Simeon and Levi, two of Jacob's sons, brothers of Dinah, took each his sword, came upon the city unmolested, and slew all the males. They put Hamor and his son Shechem to the sword, took Dinah out of Shechem's house, and went away. The other sons Jacob came upon the slain and plundered the town. Was inside the town. They seized their flocks and herds and asses, all that was inside the town and outside, all their wealth, all their children, all their wives, all that was in the houses, they took as captives and booty. Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, "You have brought trouble on me, making me odious among the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites and the Perizzites. My men are few in number, so that if they unite against me and attack me, I and my house will be destroyed." But they answered, "Should our sister be treated like a whore?"
Thank you, Richard. And Justin and Linda, if you'd like to read a little bit, we're at the very start of chapter 35. Okay.
Okay, hi. Thank you, Rabbi. We're getting there.
I know.
Okay. Very good. 35.
Right.
Chapter, okay, 1. Please start.
Okay. Thank you, Rabbi.
Yes.
Verse 1. And God said to Jacob, "Arise and go up to Beth-el and abide there, and make there an altar to the God who appeared to you when you fled from your brother Esau." Thereupon Jacob said to his household and to all those who were with him, "Remove the deities, foreign nations, which are in your midst. Purify yourselves and change your clothes. And we will arise and go up to Beth-el, and I will make an altar to the God who answered me on the day of my distress, and was with me on the way that I went." And they gave Jacob all the deities of the nations that were in their possession, and the earrings that were in their ears, and Jacob hid them under the terebinth that was near Shechem. Then they traveled, and the fear of God was upon the cities that were around them, so that they did not pursue Jacob's sons. And Jacob came to Luz, which is in the land of Canaan, that is Beth-el, and he and all the people who were with him.
He built there an altar, and he called the place El Bet El, for there God had been revealed to him when he fled from before his brother. And Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, died, and she was buried beneath Beth El, beneath the plain, so he named it Alon Bakut. And God appeared again to Jacob when he came to Padan Aram, and he blessed him. God said to him, "Your name is Jacob. Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel shall be your name." And he named him Israel. And God said to him, "I'm the Almighty God. Be fruitful and multiply." A nation and a multitude of nations shall come into existence from you, and kings shall come forth from your loins. And the land that I gave to Abraham and to Isaac, I'll give to you, and to your seed after you will I give the land.
Oh, thank you both so much. Robert, we're at verse 13 of chapter 35, if you'd like to read a little bit.
Yes, thank you. And God went up from him in the place where he talked with him. And Jacob set up a pillar in the place where he talked with him, even a pillar of stone. And he poured a drink offering thereon, and he poured oil thereon. And Jacob called the name of the place where God spake with him, Bethel. And they journeyed from Bethel and there was but a little way to come to Ephrath, and Rachel travailed, and she had hard labor. And it came to pass, when she was in hard labor, that the midwife said unto her, Fear not, thou shalt have this son also. And it came to pass, as her soul was in departing, for she died, that she called his name Benoni, but his father called him Benjamin. And Rachel died and was buried in the way of Ephrath, which is Bethlehem. And Jacob set a pillar upon her grave. That is the pillar of Rachel's grave unto this day. And Israel journeyed and spread his tent beyond the tower of Adar. And it came to pass, when Israel dwelt in that land, that Reuben went and lay with Bilhah his father's concubine, and Israel heard it. Now the sons of Jacob were 12, the sons of Leah, Reuben, Jacob's firstborn, and Simeon and Levi, and Judah, and Issachar, and Zebulun, the sons of Rachel, Joseph, and Benjamin, and the sons of Bilhah, Rachel's handmaid, Dan, and Naphtali, and the sons of Zilpah, Leah's handmaid, of Gad and Asher. These are the sons of Jacob, which were born to him in Padanaram. And Jacob came unto Isaac his father, unto Mamre, unto the city of Arba, which is Hebron, where Abraham and Isaac sojourned. And the days of Isaac were 180 years, and Isaac gave up the ghost and died, and was gathered unto his people, being old and full of days, and his sons Esau and Jacob buried him.
Thank you so much. Dave Lab, we're at the very start of chapter 36, if you'd like to read a little bit.
Okay. This is the line of Esau, that is Edom. Esau took his wives from among the Canaanite women, Adah, daughter of Elon the Hittite, and Oholibamah, daughter of Anna, daughter of Zibeon the Hivite, and also Basemath, daughter of Ishmael and sister of Nebi Yoth. Adah bore to Esau Eliphaz. Besmat bore Ruel, and Oholibamah bore Jeshu, Jalam, and Korah. These were the sons of Esau who were born to him in the land of Canaan. Esau took his wives, his sons and daughters, and all the members of his household, his cattle and all his livestock, and all the property that he had acquired in the land of Canaan, and went to another land because of his brother Jacob. For their possessions were too many for them to dwell together, and the land where they sojourned could not support them because of their livestock. So Esau settled in the hill country of Seir, Esau being Edom. And then is the line of Esau, the ancestors of the Edomites in the hill country of Seir. These are the names of Esau's sons: Eliphaz, son of Esau's wife, Adah; Reuel, son of Esau's wife, Basmath. The sons of Eliphaz were Teman, Omar, Zepho, Gatam, and Kenaz. Timnah was a concubine of Esau's son Eliphaz, and she bore Amalek to Eliphaz. Those were the descendants of Esau's wife Adah. And these were the sons of Reuel: Nahath, Zerah, Shamama, and Mizah. These were the descendants of Esau's wife Basmath. And these were the sons of Esau's wife: Oholibamah, daughter of Anna, daughter of Zibeon. She bore to Esau Jeush, Jalam, and Korah.
Oh, thank you so much. Norm, we're at verse 15, if you'd like to read a bit.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. These are the clans of the sons of Esau. The descendants of Esau's firstborn, Eliphaz, the clans Teman, Omar, Zepho, Kenaz. Korah, Garam, Amalek. These are the clans of Eliphaz in the land of Edom. These are the descendants of Adah. These are the descendants of Esau's son Reuel. The clans Nahath, Zerah, Shamath, and Mizah. These are the clans of Reuel in the land of Edom. These are the descendants of Esau's wife, Basemath. These are the descendants of Esau's wife, Oholibamah. The clans of Jeush, Jaham, and Korath. These are the clans of Esau's wife, Oholibamah, the daughter of Anah. These are the sons of Esau, that is, Edom, and those are their clans. These are the sons of Seir, the Horite, who settled in the land of Lotan, Shobal, Zibeon, Anah. Dishon, Ezer, and Dishan. These are the clans of the Horites, the descendants of Seir in the land of Edom. The sons of Lotan were Hori, Himam, and Lotan's sister was Timnah. The sons of Shobal were Alvan, Manahath, Ebal, Shepho, and Onam. The sons of Zebion were these: Ariah, how do you pronounce that? Ayah and Anah. That was Anah who discovered the hot springs in the wilderness while pasturing the asses of his father in Zibeon. The children of Anah were these: Dishon and Anah's daughter Oholibamah. The sons of Dishon were these: Hemdan, Eshban, Ithran, and Cheran. The sons of Ezer were these: Bilhan, Zaavan, and Akan. The sons of Dishon were these: Uz and Aran.
Oh, thank you so much. Let me invite Mark Levinstein, if you'd like to pick up there at verse 29.
Thank you, Rabbi. These are the clans of the Horites, the clans Lotan, Shobal, Zibeon, Anah, Dishon, Ezer, and Dishan. Those are the clans of the Horites, clan by clan in the land of Seir. These are the kings who reigned in the land of Edom before any king reigned over the Israelites. Bela, son of Beor, reigned in Edom. The name of his city is Dinhabah. When Bela died, Joabab, son of Zerah from Bozrah, succeeded him as king. When Joabab died, Husham of the land of the Temanites succeeded him as king. When Husham died, Hadad, son of Bedad, who defeated the Midianites in the country of the Moab, succeeded him as king. The name of his city was Avith. Hadad died. Samlah of Masrekah succeeded him as king. When Samlah died, Saul of Rehoboth on the river succeeded him as king. When Saul died, Baal Hanan, son of Achbor, succeeded him as king. And while Balanan, son of Abhor, died, Hadar succeeded him as king. The name of his city was Pau. And his wife's name was Mehetabel, daughter of Matred, daughter of Mizahah. These are the names of the clans of Esau, each with its families and locality, name by name. The clans Timan, Alva, Jetheth, Oholibama, Elah, Pinon, Kezan, Teman, Mizbar, Magdiel, and Iram. Those are the clans of Edom, that is, of Esau, father of the Edomites, by their settlements in the land which they hold.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. That's our entire Torah portion for the week I'd like to share with you, focus study about. If you have a copy of the study sheet, I invite you to take it out now. This is certainly a Torah portion that is filled with both a number of crises, and interestingly enough, it ends up, the entire last chapter of our portion ends up with a itemization and recitation of the entire family of Esau, the Edomites, who, of course, eventually in history will become antagonistic towards the Israelites. So interesting that this chapter, which deals with these crises that Jacob faces, concludes with a recognition of the fulfillment of a promise that was made by God to Abraham, that Ishmael and his lineage would also be a great source of nations as well. What caught my attention this year was the opening crisis, and that is when Jacob is waiting to receive his brother, Esau, whom he hasn't seen in some 20 years, and since the time that he participated in this act of deception that tricked their father Isaac into giving Jacob a blessing that normally would have gone to Esau as the older brother. So now Jacob seems quite anxious as he awaits this confrontation with Esau. He doesn't know exactly what's going to happen, but he fears that Esau, especially when he hears that he's coming with 400 soldiers, is about to exact some kind of vengeance on Jacob for the trick that he played on him some 20 years ago. So I looked at the Hebrew, and it's interesting. I'll read the translation of chapter 32, verse 8, which is kind of at the very beginning of where we are. And my translation from the Jewish Publication Society says this: Jacob was greatly frightened. In his anxiety, he divided the people with him and the flocks and herds and camels into two camps. I turned and looked at the medieval commentator Rashi to see if he had any commentary about that opening verse, and indeed he does. And he takes focus on the word that in my translation is rendered as anxiety, and which is the word in Hebrew, yetzer. And he looks at that word, yetzer, and he wonders, well, if you're frightened, of course you're going to be distressed or anxious. So Rashi is looking at it and says, so why do you need to say that as well? What additional meaning is provided by saying not only was he frightened, he was anxious? And what Rashi comes up with is that, well, he was frightened and he was distressed. He was frightened because he was afraid that Esau was coming to kill him. But the distress was about a completely different matter. Rashi says he was distressed because if Esau came to attack him, then by legal right, Jacob would be justified in defending himself and possibly killing his brother Esau. And that he knew would cause great sorrow for their father, Isaac. So he was frightened that he would be killed and distressed that he might be forced to kill. Well, I looked at those words and I was, of course, learning from Rashi. At the same time, it caused me to dwell a little bit longer than I might otherwise have on the word that is translated in my edition as anxiety, this verb yetzer. So I looked up the root. The root is sarar, which means to bind up, to tie up, to be restricted, to be cramped, to be in straits about something. And as I kind of paused over that word, I remembered, this word sarar also gives birth to the word Mitzrayim,
Yes.
which is the word for Egypt eventually. And I thought more about that, and I thought, often for years and years and years, when we talked about Mitzrayim as this land of constraint, I thought about it in terms of from the point of view of the Israelites, that the Israelites were somehow in a place of constrainment, of being restricted, of being bound up. And I thought about it, I thought, but why then would the term be used to describe this place called Egypt? Somehow it is describing Egypt itself, that Egypt itself is constrained, is tied up, is cramped, is restricted in some kind of way. And I thought, well, Egypt is this place of, it was the superpower of the known world at the time. It was a place of enormous wealth. It was a place of enormous power. Why would the term to be constrained, to be bound up, to be cramped in some kind of way, be used to describe a nation of great power and wealth? And then I thought, well, maybe that's the source of that nation's restrictions and confinement and limitation. It's overemphasis on power, domination, and wealth. So I want to play just a little bit more with this notion about this degree of constrainment and confinement as somehow being related not to having little, but to having too much, or placing a value, too much value, on having wealth and power and domination. So in the Talmud, in the Talmud, there's this lovely discussion that happens in a volume called Bava Metzia, where they are looking at, well, what blessing should be said over grain? And they have a discussion that goes, well, have you counted the grain yet? Have you laid the grain out on the floor yet? And each time you do something different with the grain, the blessing itself changes a little bit. And then there's this lovely little section that comes out of that discussion about what blessing do you recite to grain in its different iteration of its life. The sages taught, one who goes to measure the grain on his threshing floor recites, "May it be your will, O Lord our God, that you send blessing upon the product of our hands." If one began to measure the grain, he says, "Blessed is he who sends blessing upon this pile of grain." If one measured and afterward recited this blessing, well, this is a prayer that is made in vain, because blessing is found neither in a matter that is weighed, nor in a matter that is measured, nor in a matter that is counted. Rather, it is found in a matter concealed from the eye. As it is stated, the Lord will command blessing with you in your storehouses. That last section there, that quote, is from Deuteronomy, okay, where it discusses a blessing upon grain. So this little bit, what starts out as a technical discussion about what are the words of a blessing to be recited over grain during different stages of its processing, ends up with this rather interesting philosophical or spiritual message about the nature of blessing. And embedded in there is the notion that a blessing from above does not rest on something that has been counted, but rather on something that's hidden from the eye. And when I read that and understood that, it got me to thinking about something that we've talked about in the past, about how Torah is black fire written on white fire, and these two notions that we have this, what we'll call the revealed message of a divine message, which is contained in the black letters, and then there's the as yet to be revealed message, which is contained in the white spaces. And in Jewish Kabbalistic tradition, the white fire, the white spaces, actually has a higher level of sanctity than the black letters. Why is that? Why would something that can't be seen, that is yet to be revealed, have a higher level of sanctity than that which has been revealed and been resolved into some kind of form that we can actually see and recognize? And I think it's because that which is yet to be revealed evokes from us the desire to explore and to discover the meaning. So rather than to be presented with meaning, the higher level of sanctity is that which we are invited to discover, that which is unknown, that which is, in a sense, uncertain, unpredictable. So with that, I'd like to share with you a painting that will get us into a little bit, I think, more a deeper sense of this level of uncertainty, the unknownness, the yet to be revealed, and that being a source of blessing. So the painting is by Jonas Gerard. Jonas Gerard was born in Casablanca, Morocco, to parents of French and Brazilian heritage. Eventually comes to the United States. He wants to be a painter. He spends time in Greenwich Village. He then goes to Miami, and then eventually settles in Asheville, North Carolina, where he sets up a studio. And he is an abstract expressionist, who was an abstract expressionist. He died just a few years ago. And one of the things that's interesting about him is the role that music plays in his work. And he would constantly play music, sometimes from his Moroccan heritage, sometimes from his Brazilian heritage. Certainly music was all around him in Greenwich Village with jazz. It was all around him in Miami with Cuban music. And he would play music, and often he would paint in the course of what he called painting performances, where he would actually invite people to be around him while he painted. And he would listen to the music, and he would let the music guide him and inspire him and draw things out of him as to what he wanted to paint. And so the notion of spontaneity, of being in the moment and creating in the moment, rather than having planned out what the outcome he wanted to have on the canvas, was so fundamental to his work. And so he has, we have this quote from him: "Uncertainty is a great blessing if you can flow with it. If you're stuck on your determination, on your outcome, then uncertainty doesn't have a chance and miracles can't happen." This notion about, if you will, spontaneity and not being attached to the outcome, but discovering what's inside of you in that moment and painting it and playing it, it was certainly very much a part of John Coltrane's jazz music, who was one of the great improvisational musicians. And one of the greatest compositions or pieces he ever played, it's called A Love Supreme, which is really a spiritual journey, as John Coltrane sought to transcend the limitations of what it meant to be a self and to make contact with that which is all pervasive and all existing and the source of everything. And his the A Love Supreme is in 4 movements, and the final movement is called Psalm. And for that final movement, John Coltrane actually wrote a text, a poem, but he didn't read that text in words for his album. Instead, he played it musically. He played a note for each syllable of each word that he had written. And it was, for him, it was more powerful to play musically what he had been inspired to write than to read the words that had settled on the page. And Patti Smith, great American songwriter, musician, who traveled an enormous spiritual path of her own. One of the people that inspired her most was John Coltrane. And she wrote this: "In times of strife, we have our imagination. We have our creative impulse, which are things that are more important than material things. They are the things that we should magnify. As a performer, one has a mission, like Coltrane, to take your solo out to talk to God." One more musician to bring into the discussion, someone I just recently discovered, Jonathan Bliss. Jonathan Bliss is a classical pianist. He's also very immersed in and devoted to his Judaism. And he just had a piece in the New York Times recently, an essay about at least his experience growing up as a trained classical pianist, feeling that the emphasis, his experience anyway, that the emphasis was getting everything right, getting every note right, playing everything perfectly. And for him, he encountered a distress in that. And in this essay, he wrote, "Our society faces serious, complex problems that cause real suffering and that pose serious threats. Finding solutions to those problems will involve imagination and courage, qualities that flourish only when we embrace uncertainty and acknowledge all that we do not and perhaps cannot know." I read that and I thought, Torah is not a book of certainty. Torah is not a book that leads to clarity and resolution. Torah, indeed the entire Jewish Bible, is a book that leads from one uncertainty to another. That's where the discovery is going to be made. That's where the human development will occur. So I look back at Jacob and his moment of distress, and how did he respond in that moment? And the text tells us that he caused everything that he owned, everything that he had, to be pushed forward ahead of him, to cross over him. And then the text says, and all that remained was himself. And in that moment of having rid himself of all these layers of protection, when he was alone and vulnerable, that's the moment when he has this divine wrestling encounter. And he becomes transformed. And that moment of transformation is symbolized by his receiving a new name. And he emerges from it both transformed and injured. And he limps. He limps forever after that. And the fact that he has this moment of transformation doesn't mean that he's now immune, inoculated against moral failures, because we see in this very same portion, he collapses morally again following the incident with his daughter Dinah. But Torah is telling us something about how to deal with these moments of fears and anxieties, which is rather, instead of layering ourselves with more and more protection, whether it be emotional protection, material protection, what we need to do is to shed ourselves and become vulnerable and discover what we can become, what's possible to become if we wrestle with what's at stake. So with that, I'd love to know what you encountered or when you heard in the course of our reading our portion of Vayishlach, he sent forward. Go ahead, Rose.
Oh, okay. I found what you just said, Rabbi, very interesting and very transcendent. But as is my wont, I'm going to kind of focus more on the text and kind of as a political treatise, because I think a lot of stuff is being set up in the story for how power is going to be distributed. I think the thing with Jacob and Esau is very interesting, but even in his time of anxiety, he's still a pretty shrewd operator. He knows about flattering and giving gifts to someone whom he perceives as a threat to him, which many of our current leaders have also learned. Going past that, though, I think it's also a description that he goes from place to place and he builds altars there. And that's not just, I think, that he's feeling holiness and devotion to that place. He's doing with the altars what Isaac did with altars, but also with wells, and what Abraham did with altars and wells, setting them up all over to establish ownership and presence in Canaan. And finally, I think that the thing with Dinah, yeah, I mean, he acts terribly instead of going, oh, this is terrible, the thing that happened to my daughter. And you guys are terrible too for killing all these guys. Instead, he says, this is a real problem for me politically, with the other chieftains, and it's going to create a problem for me. And also, what this incident does is take Shimon and Levi off the chessboard, at least as being future leaders. Although Levi does become the priest, as far as political leaders, it takes them off the chessboard because they're too hot-headed. And we'll see the same thing happen to Reuven when he does his thing in the next chapter. So this clears the way for Yehuda, who then will emerge, because even though he's the fourth brother, these other brothers have disqualified themselves, so that the mantle of leadership, and he'll show himself in a very good light all through the narrative. So, Team Yehuda is always kind of being pushed forward. So that's what I have to say.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to make sure we get as many people who want to speak as would like to, and then we'll come back and kind of summarize all these comments. So thank you, Rose. Let me call upon Mark Thompson.
Thank you, Rabbi. If you don't mind, as I was listening to the conversation and listening to your your commentary. I actually wrote down some thoughts, and I hope you don't mind if I read them because I think they'll come out a little more clearly. But in Vayishlach, Jacob's imagination becomes both his tormentor and his teacher. So the Torah portion opens with Jacob returning home after 20 years in exile, only to face the brother that he's fled. And the text tells us very little about Esau's intentions, only that he's approaching with 400 men. Everything else comes from Jacob's imagination. And that imagination works in two opposite directions. First is fear. His mind is his own enemy. He assumes the worst. He's greatly afraid and distressed, as we read in Genesis 32:8. And then Rashi says, afraid he might be killed, distressed he might have to kill. So his imagination fills the silence with danger. There's no message from Esau. There's no threat, no ultimatum. Yet Jacob imagines disaster unfolding. And so in this case, we can see how imagination can become a liability in dealing with problems. You project disasters, you magnify threats, you respond not to reality, but to what our fear invents. So Jacob, in this case, becomes a prisoner of a story he himself has created. On the other hand, his imagination serves as a point of courage. He sees possibility, not doom. His imagination doesn't stop there. He imagines a way forward. He pictures reconciliation. And then he acts rationally on that vision. He prepares gifts with careful diplomacy. He divides his camp strategically. He prays and he imagines divine partnership, not abandonment. And he wrestles through the night, confronting that part of himself that is terrified. And so then when the morning comes, Esau has no longer any fear. And maybe it never existed at all. So then his courage, as well as his cowardice, in a sense, both come from imagination. The ability to see a future different from the nightmare his fear painted. So it's a paradox. The same imagination creates the demon and the blessing.
Wow, fascinating. Thank you. I'll come back to all that too. Let me call upon Richard here.
Oh, thank you, Rabbi. Three small things. I read this week that the devil urges us to sin because it leads us to despair. And we are distressed at discovering how we've gotten off the track. And another thing was that mitzvah and yitzer sound pretty much alike to me. But the one that really struck me was the idea of having holdings. I remember reading that we made the big mistake in Egypt of acquiring holdings because the result was we became slaves. And here we acquire holdings and we become a dominating race of people who totally massacre these folks. And that it seemed to me that, well, this is what anxiety is about, that you're in a tension where you can't do right and you can't do the wrong. You're done either way. And that's what we get in a polarized society. And we're dealing with that now. And people want to make a way to fix it all. Well, maybe just this is the way it is. And what we can do is do something within that attenuates the anxiety that we create for ourselves by trying to take one extreme or the other. And the business about holdings seemed very clear that we left Egypt because we took holdings and it wound up making us slaves. And here we had a good excuse. I'm not saying we shouldn't have done it or they shouldn't have done it. It is what it is. It is a story after all. But the result was we took all their stuff and all their people. And how do you stay in the middle and feel alive.
Wow. Thank you, Richard. And anyone else? Yes, Norm, please.
So interesting comments. Thank you to everybody. I see echoes going through, reverberating through this parsha and the one before. The story starts with Esau and Jacob struggling with each other instead of Rebecca, and she's saying, "I don't need this." But the struggle starts then, and it's a struggle between might and between kind of a combination of intellect and ability, let's say, and leadership. And in the beginning, might wins out because Esau is born first, leading to a hornet's nest of problems because he's not a bad person, but he's not eligible for leadership, let alone leadership of the family. The next foray between might and intellect comes 20 years later or so when we have the vignette about the blessing. Well, the right of the firstborn with the porridge and with the blessing for leadership. And at that time, intellect and ability is going to win out. Fast forward another, 20 or so years, when Jacob is now returning from Padam Aram, and the might is again with Esau with 400 men. I mean, in those days, that's a major army. That's an invasive force, leading me to wonder, what the heck is he going to do with 400 people, 400 men? Number one, you got to feed them. Number two, you got to do something with everybody. That's not it's not the Elks Club where people go home at night. And it's going to be might against intellect. Jacob gives all this material, um, all these wealth, material wealth, to Esau, and he's saying, "Look, this was not about material stuff to begin with. This was about right-sizing the family. It's about understanding the struggle between might and ability and right." So I see these echoes bouncing back and forth through the story. Esau wants to complicate things by staying with Jacob and by assigning some of his men there, and Jacob was nice enough to say, "Well, thanks, but no thanks."
Okay. Thank you, Norm. And I'm going to cycle through as many of these comments as I can in just a moment. Is there anyone else that wants to share? Okay, then here, let me just say that when I look at Torah, I approach Torah to answer this question. How does this book help us learn about ourselves and about how to fulfill our mission of being a human being that's a blessing to the world? And some of the answers are provided in the Black Fire, and a lot of the answers are provided in the White Fire. And so when one focuses on the black letter, the Black Fire part of this, yes, there are these descriptions, as Rose was pointing out, about how what's happening here is a setting up of power relationships and paving the way for some to ascend and so forth. And so if one wants to focus on the Black Fire aspect of what's there, then one might consider, are all those, all that posturing and positioning, is that going to turn out to be helpful or harmful? So we'll see as we go through the life of this family. We'll have some points of view about that. And then when Mark talks about Jacob and his imagination, and we don't know, he doesn't have any real objective information that that Esau is necessarily there to kill him. It's his imagination that causes him to think that. And in a sense, that's because Jacob, his default thinking is that of a strategist and that of someone who's always trying to get one up on someone else. So he assumes that that's the way other people are thinking as well. Now, if he had taken a step back and looked at his brother, he would have realized what a completely different personality his brother was, how a completely different way he viewed the world was, and maybe would have come to a different conclusion. If he had remembered the time that his brother came rushing in, some over 20 years ago, came rushing in from this day of hunting and smells the food that Jacob has been at home slowly cooking, this red stew, and Esau is famished and says, "Give me some of that stew." And you get the sense that, and when Jacob says, "Well, okay, but I need something in return, so give me, hand me the inheritance that you're going to get." And he said, "Well, who needs inheritance now? Now I'm hungry." And so you get the sense that Esau is this impulsive character who doesn't think things through, who's not a strategist the way Jacob is. And we see that in this week's Torah portion, when Esau gives no thought of what happened 20 years ago. He just sees his brother, rushes up to him, grabs around his neck, and gives him kisses. And is so happy to see him. And in fact, he's so happy to see him, he says to his brother, "Jacob, Jacob, Jacob, come on to my house. We'll have some coffee and cake and ice cream, and it'll be great. It'll be, we'll have a lot of fun." And Jacob is the one, "Yeah, you go ahead, and I'll be right behind you." And, he veers off and goes on a different path. So sometimes from that, we look at that and we say, well, yes, sometimes I respond to situations assuming that how I would behave is the way the person in front of me would behave, rather than spending the time to look at this person, to know this person, and to realize there's someone other than me in the world. And I love this notion that Richard shared about the devil urges us to sin as a way to lead us to distress, which leads us to make a crisis within our life, which allows us to burst through the routine way that we have approached things, and gives us the opportunity to respond differently and to access a different part of ourselves than has been operative in the world up to this moment. And Norm's comments about might and intellectual response to the world. Again, I look at that material and I look at, we can either only live in the world according to what has already been formulated and decided and presented to us, and is thus that which is comprehensible. That's what the black fire is, that which is comprehensible. But there's other material which is incomprehensible, that which is yet to be discovered by us, that which it takes some work to discover. And if you live too much in either world, I think we miss out, and we're only half the human being that we could be. And so this lovely approach that our tradition extends to us, which is what you see in the black letters is only half of Torah. The other half requires listening, attention, imagination, and creativity. A responsibility of discovery on our part. And so that is kind of all that's kind of coming to the surface now as we get deeper into the story here. All that's coming more to the surface, or more apparent, that we need to pay attention to both white fire and black fire, between that which has reached a level of formulation and comprehension and that which is still in the process and constantly in the process of formulation and is currently to be discovered. So that is what our various artists, our visual artist, Jonas Gerard, our musical artists, John Coltrane, Patti Smith, Jonathan Bliss, what they are also reminding us of, that there may be notes written, but it's when one becomes invested in those notes, when one gives one's personal understanding of those notes, that real beauty comes into the world. And I want to thank each and every one of you for being evocators of beauty, of drawing upon not just what has been determined, but what is yet to be discovered. And together, we make a beautiful world. Thank you all very much. I look forward to our next gathering. Be well, everyone. God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Good
much.
night.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.